She handed me a cardboard box with both hands, the way you'd hand someone a bag of old newspapers headed for the recycling bin. My daughter-in-law's smile didn't reach her eyes. It never did. "This is everything from the storage unit," she said. "Everything of Nathan's that we thought you'd want." I stood on the porch of what used to be my son's house, the house I helped him buy, the house where my grandchildren learned to walk, and I held that box while she closed the door in my face, not slammed, just closed, quietly, which was somehow worse. Nathan had been gone 11 weeks. 11 weeks since the police called me at 6 in the morning, 11 weeks since I drove 4 hours to a hospital in Knoxville, only to be told there was nothing left to do. A blood clot, they said, massive and sudden. He was 41 years old, and he was gone before the ambulance reached the interstate. My son, my only child. I sat in my truck in the parking lot for a long time before I drove home. The box sat on my kitchen table for 3 days before I could open it. I'm not proud of that. I'm 67 years old, and I've buried a wife and both parents, and I thought I understood grief by now. I did not. Losing a child is a different country entirely. You don't speak the language. You don't know the roads. When I finally opened it, I found what you'd expect. A watch I'd given him for his college graduation, a folded photograph of the two of us at a Cardinals game, maybe 2009, both of us squinting into the sun, a small pocket knife that had been his grandfather's, a St. Christopher medal on a thin chain, and at the bottom, beneath an old flannel shirt that still smelled like him, a set of keys. I didn't recognize them at first. They were on a plain metal ring with a small rectangular tag, the kind you get from a hardware store when you have a copy made. Someone had written on the tag in blue ink, in handwriting I knew as well as my own name, Dad, Storage Unit 14, Clarksburg Self-Storage, Route 9. Don't tell anyone. I love you. I read it 3 times. Then I sat down on the kitchen floor, which is not something I have done since I was a very small child, and I stayed there for a while. My daughter-in-law's name is Sandra. I have tried, over the years, to find things to like about her. She is organized, she is punctual, she keeps a clean house. But from the very beginning, even before she and Nathan married, there was something in the way she looked at me that I could never quite name. Like she was calculating something, like I was a variable in an equation she was always working out in her head. Her brother Cody was worse. Cody had been living in Nathan's basement for the better part of 2 years before my son died. He had a habit of answering questions that weren't addressed to him and laughing too loudly at his own jokes. Nathan tolerated him the way you tolerate a persistent headache. Not because you've stopped noticing it, but because you've run out of things to do about it. After Nathan died, Cody didn't leave. He moved upstairs. I found this out from my neighbor Phyllis, who drives past that neighborhood on her way to the grocery store. I saw his truck in the driveway, she told me, 3 weeks after the funeral. Every morning, Gus. Every single morning. I didn't say anything to Sandra. What was I going to say anything to Sandra? What was I going to say? The estate went through probate, which in Tennessee takes longer than you'd think. Nathan had a will. I knew he had a will because I was there when he signed it 2 years ago in the office of an attorney named Foster on Commerce Street in Nashville. In that will, Nathan had left the house and his financial accounts to Sandra, which I understood. He had also set aside a college fund for the kids, which was held in a separate trust, untouchable. And he had left me his truck, a 2019 Ford F-250, and a small savings account with about $12,000 in it. I was grateful for that. I didn't need Nathan's money. I have my pension from 31 years with the county roads department and my Social Security, and I own my house outright. I was grateful because it meant he had thought of me. But when the truck was transferred to my name and I went to the bank to claim the savings account, the account had been closed, emptied 2 days after Nathan's death, before the will had even been filed. The attorney said there wasn't much to be done. The account hadn't been flagged as part of the estate. Sandra had been a joint account holder. Nathan must have added her at some point, maybe years ago, and she had simply withdrawn the funds before probate began. Legal, technically, not criminal. Just the kind of thing a person does when they know exactly what they're doing. I drove home with the truck and without the $12,000, and I told myself to let it go. I am not a man who has ever been good at letting things go, but I have learned in 67 years to at least pretend. I drove Nathan's truck for the first time on a Wednesday morning, 3 weeks after Sandra handed me that box. I had been putting it off. My own truck ran fine. I didn't need another vehicle, but something in me finally said that avoiding it wasn't honoring my son. It was just avoiding my son. I adjusted the seat. I moved the mirrors. I ran my hands along the steering wheel the way you do when something belongs to someone who is gone and you're trying to decide if touching it is a comfort or a wound. Then I turned on the ignition and the GPS screen lit up. Nathan had one of those built-in systems, the kind with the touch screen in the center console. I've never trusted them much. I'm a paper map man from way back. But the screen came to life and showed his last route, still saved from whenever he drove last, and I just sat there looking at it. There was a destination saved, not the last route, something he pinned deliberately, the little icon that means saved location. It was labeled with a single word, Dad. My chest did something I don't have a word for. Like everything inside it shifted 2 inches to the left. The address was in Clarksburg, 40 minutes from where I was sitting, Route 9. The same road written on the key tag. I want to be honest about what I was thinking as I drove there. I was not thinking clearly. I am aware of that now. I was 67 years old, and I had lost my son, and I was driving toward an address he had hidden for me, and I was not in any condition to be making rational assessments of the situation. What I was thinking, if I am being truthful, was that I needed to get there. That was the whole of it. The self-storage facility on Route 9 is the kind of place that has been there since before the road was widened. A long, low building with orange roll-up doors and a gravel lot and a keypad at the entrance that my keycard opened on the first try. Unit 14 was at the far end of the second row. I stood in front of the door for a moment. I put the key in the padlock. I turned it. Inside, a metal filing cabinet, a folding table, a plastic storage bin, and 3 cardboard boxes, neatly stacked, each one labeled in Nathan's handwriting. The label on the first box said insurance. The second said property. The third said read first. I opened the third box. Inside was an envelope, and inside the envelope was a letter. 7 pages, handwritten, dated 8 months before Nathan died. I will not reproduce every word of that letter. Some of it belongs only to me, but I will tell you what it said, because you deserve to understand what my son had done and why. Nathan had known he was sick, not the blood clot that came without warning, that was genuinely sudden. The doctors were not lying about that. But before the blood clot, before any of that, Nathan had been diagnosed with a heart condition, a serious one. The kind that can be managed but not cured. He had been told 18 months before he died that his long-term prognosis was uncertain. He did not tell me. He told me in the letter that he didn't tell me because he knew what I would do. He knew I would move closer. He knew I would call every day. He knew I would spend every conversation fighting back fear, and he didn't want to spend whatever time he had watching me grieve him while he was still alive. He said he was sorry for that. He said it more than once. What he did instead was plan. He had known for longer than I realized that his marriage was not what it appeared. Sandra had been involved with her brother's business dealings. Cody ran a property management company that Nathan had discovered was not entirely legitimate. Double billing, inflated invoices, money cycle, due shell accounts. Nathan had been cooperating quietly with a financial crimes investigator for 14 months. He hadn't told me because he was afraid for my safety and because the investigation was sealed. He had also updated his will, not the official one, but a supplementary document that his attorney had filed separately in a different county in a way that Sandra would not know to look for. In it, he had left me clear title to a piece of property, 11 acres in Polk County, that he had purchased 4 years ago under an LLC in his name alone, which had never been included in any of the marital asset disclosures Sandra's attorneys had reviewed. The land, his letter told me, was worth more than I would expect. He had also left me in the filing cabinet documentation of every improper transfer Sandra had made in the months before his death, including the savings account. And he had left me the contact information for the financial crimes investigator, a woman named Agent Darlene Pruitt, with a note that said she was expecting my call. The last line of the letter said this: "You always told me that the Lord has a way of making things right, Dad. I think maybe I just helped him along a little bit. I love you more than you know." I sat down on the concrete floor of that storage unit and I read that letter again from the beginning. I called Agent Pruitt the next morning. She answered on the second ring, and when I told her my name, she said, "Mr. Gus, I've been hoping to hear from you." She had a Georgia accent and a voice that sounded like she had dealt with worse than Cody and Sandra before breakfast. She told me that the investigation had been ongoing and that Nathan's cooperation had been critical. She told me that the documents in the filing cabinet were exactly what they needed. She told me that things were going to move quickly now and that I should speak with the estate attorney before saying anything further. I called Nathan's original attorney, a man named James Foster, and he was not surprised to hear from me. He had been waiting, he said. Nathan had arranged everything carefully. The supplementary will had already been authenticated. The property in Polk County was mine. I went to see that property on a Saturday morning in October. I drove out there alone down a county road that turned to gravel about a mile from the gate. 11 acres of hardwood timber, backed up against a creek, with a cleared flat section at the top of a gentle hill where someone had laid a foundation. Concrete footings, surveyed and permitted for a structure that had never been built. I stood on that foundation for a long time. The trees were turning. The creek made its sound down below. A hawk crossed overhead without hurrying. My son had bought this land 4 years ago, and he had never told me. And standing there, I understood why. He was saving it for what came after. For a version of the future where I would need something to hold on to. The investigation concluded in the spring. Cody was indicted on 7 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of money laundering. 2 of his employees accepted plea deals. Sandra was charged separately as an accessory for her role in concealing assets and for the improper withdrawal from Nathan's account. Her attorney negotiated the account repayment as part of a settlement, which means I received the $12,000 back with interest through the court. I did not celebrate any of this. I want to be clear about that. There is no version of justice that brings my son back, and I'm old enough to know the difference between satisfaction and happiness. I felt something when I heard about the indictment. Relief, maybe. Or the particular quiet that comes when a thing you've been bracing against finally falls. Sandra and Cody moved out of Nathan's house before the trial. The house went back into the estate, and after the legal proceedings settled, the equity was divided according to the supplementary will. My grandchildren's college trust was never touched. Nathan had made certain of that, had structured it so that not even the courts could reach it. My grandchildren come to see me on weekends now. Their mother has supervised visitation for the time being, and the kids stay with me on alternating Saturdays. We go down to the creek on the property in Polk County. I'm building something up there. Nothing grand, just a cabin, single story, with a porch that faces west so you can see the sun go down over the ridge. My neighbor's son helps me on weekends. We're not in any hurry. I found a photograph last month in the breast pocket of Nathan's old flannel shirt, the one that had been in the bottom of that cardboard box. A photograph of the two of us, taken maybe 15 years ago out at a lake in Missouri where we used to fish every August. We're both holding up our catch, both grinning the way you grin when you're genuinely happy, and you know it. Nathan looks exactly like his mother around the eyes. He always did. I put the photograph on the mantel above my fireplace. I look at it every morning. There is a thing I've come to believe, and I've believed it longer than I can remember, but I believe it differently now. I believe that love doesn't end. I believe it changes form, becomes something you carry instead of something you hold, but it doesn't end. Nathan knew what was coming, and he spent 18 months making sure I would be all right. That is not a small thing. That is everything. I drive his truck every day now. I've gotten used to it. The seat remembers him a little differently than it remembers me, tilted back just slightly further than I'd set it, and sometimes I don't adjust it. Sometimes I just drive. The GPS still has that saved destination. I haven't deleted it. It still says Dad. I haven't deleted it. It still says Dad. I don't need it to take me anywhere. I just like knowing it's there. I like knowing that somewhere in the machinery of that ordinary Tuesday morning when I first turned that engine over and the screen lit up, my son had thought to put my name in it. As if to say, wherever you're going, I wanted you to know I was thinking of you. That's the kind of man he was. Drop your location in the comments below and tell me, has someone ever left you something that didn't make sense until the right moment? I'd love to hear your story. And if this one meant something to you, share it with someone who needs it today. I've had a lot of time to think about what happened. That's the thing about getting older. You have more time to sit with things, to turn them over slowly and look at them from every angle. And what I keep coming back to is this. The way a person lives eventually catches up with them. Not always on our schedule, not always in the way we choose, but it catches up. Sandra and Cody believed they were smart, and in a narrow technical sense they were. They knew which accounts to empty first. They knew how to move through probate without tripping a wire. They knew how to smile at a funeral while doing math in their heads. That takes a certain kind of intelligence, I suppose. But intelligence without honesty is just a sharper tool for digging yourself a deeper hole. They spent years building something on a foundation that couldn't hold weight, and when it finally came down, it came down all at once. What they never accounted for was Nathan. My son was not a loud man. He didn't argue at Thanksgiving or raise his voice in parking lots. He kept things close. But underneath that quietness was a kind of methodical patience I didn't fully appreciate until I sat on the floor of a storage unit in Clarksburg reading 7 pages of his handwriting. He had seen what was happening around him, and instead of reacting, he planned. 18 months of careful, deliberate work, not out of hatred, not out of bitterness, but because he loved his children, and he loved me, and he was not willing to leave us unprotected. That is what I think about when people ask me if I'm angry about what Sandra and Cody did. I'm not, particularly. What I feel is something closer to gratitude, which surprises me every time I notice it. Gratitude that my son was the kind of man who thought 10 steps ahead. Gratitude that he trusted me enough to leave me a trail. Gratitude that I was stubborn enough to get off my kitchen floor and drive to Route 9. There's a lesson in that, and I'm not going to dress it up. The lesson is that how you treat people is a kind of decision you make every single day, and those decisions accumulate. Sandra and Cody made their decisions. Nathan made his. I made mine to keep showing up, to not look away, to follow a set of keys to a storage unit even when I wasn't sure I was ready for what I'd find. Every one of those choices had a consequence. Every single one. What I want to say to anyone carrying something heavy right now is this. Don't confuse silence for absence. The people who love you are often doing more on your behalf than you can see. And don't confuse someone's patience for weakness. The quietest people in the room are sometimes the ones who have thought the longest and planned the most carefully. I drive Nathan's truck every morning. The GPS still has his saved destination with my name on it. I'll never delete it. Some things you keep not because they're useful, but because they remind you who you come from and what you're made of. I'm still figuring out what I'm made of at 67, but I think that's all right. I think that might be the whole point.